Alexander would have his shot at revenge.
I would run with the line that Alexander's manic ambition is fueled as a response to his father's enormous success. He is a spark struck off Philip, and it's a very, very powerful, more than a spark, it's a devouring flame.
This devouring flame came close to consuming Alexander. Throughout his short life, Philip would haunt him, driving him to greater and greater feats in an effort to prove he was good enough, or perhaps even better than his father. With the ghost of Philip, Alexander sets out on the path of glory. In 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with his army. He begins an 11-year journey of unparalleled conquest and ambition that would forever reshape the ancient world. His first stop, the fallen walls of Troy, to pay tribute to his childhood hero Achilles. Like the great mythic battle for Troy, Alexander is preparing for his own epic battle. His opponent? One of the richest and most powerful men on earth, King Darius III. The Persian monarch has no idea of the force he is up against. Alexander has been left a golden legacy by his father, one of the ancient world's best trained and most disciplined armies. Even more than Philip, the young king is a charismatic and inspiring leader.
I think the secret to Alexander's military genius is that he's extremely decisive, he's bold, and he seems fearless to the point of being reckless at times. That he never seems to hesitate to go dashing off into the action.
The invaders march south to Issus in modern-day Turkey. Alexander's troops are outnumbered by Darius's army. But this is exactly the kind of challenge Alexander relishes.
Alexander's ability to adapt is really the mark of a great general. Greatest generals in military history are able to do that. He was able to see the situation in a sweep of the eye and then come up with a plan that would overcome the obstacles that would stymie any other commander.
Alexander quickly sizes up his enemy. The infantry are protected by archers, a sure sign Darius has no faith in his foot soldiers. Alexander makes his first move, using one of the most powerful weapons in his arsenal, the weapon of fear.
They're not watchers of drama for nothing. Utterly terrifying. They'd clash their shields, spears would move from side to side, and they'd walk forwards for the final bit with the incredible, chilling, endless roar of "Ah la 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 la, ah la 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 la" as they came up, terrifying.
Alexander charges into the river and up the opposite bank. In the ensuing chaos, the Persian left flank collapses. In an almost photographic image, this monumental battle is captured in a mosaic from Pompeii. It is presumed to be a faithful copy of a painting from the late 4th century BC. When Alexander finally comes face to face with his nemesis Darius, he first spears Darius's bodyguard. All around Alexander are Persian soldiers filled with terror and fear. Faced with an unstoppable avenger, Darius flees.
Well, when the Persian army sees its king, the great king, the Shah, running away like that, what are the rest of them to think? There's an incredible psychological impact of that kind of a moment upon the Persians. And as soon as that happens, the battle is won.
Still, Alexander is ruthless. By the end of the day, more than 50,000 Persians lay dead.
There's no doubt Alexander loved killing. His favourite daily pursuit is hunting. And here we're talking about real hunting. He goes in alone, unarmoured, against lions. Gosh, heavens, can you imagine it? It's just to keep fit for the days when he's attacking men.
But behind this bloodthirsty killer is a cunning mind. Alexander, like any modern-day politician, understands the importance of image and publicity. He is determined to become a legend in his own time. On the campaign, he brings along his own personal historian and paid spin doctor, Callisthenes.
Callisthenes' role in Alexander's campaign was to act as the publicity agent, the official PR representative. And it seems fairly clear that as Alexander marched along, what Callisthenes was doing was sort of pounding out these reports from the front. So he was kind of like the embedded journalist for Alexander's campaign.
After the Battle of Issus, Alexander and his army advanced down the coast of modern-day Lebanon. Most cities surrender, but the island of Tyre resists.
Alexander's attitude toward defiance was either join me or die.
Alexander begins what would become the longest and most brutal siege of his campaign. After 7 grueling months, when the walls are finally breached, 7,000 Tyrians are killed and 30,000 enslaved. To prove a point to other cities that might resist, he has 2,000 Tyrian fighters crucified.
When he was finished, he allowed the bloodlust of his men to run loose and killed virtually every male inhabitant of the fortress. It was an awful display of brutality, but it was also very effective in showing to any other potential enemies what could happen if they resisted.
In another savage siege, this time at Gaza, Alexander's army kills every man in the city.
From a military perspective, he did everything right, or nearly everything. And there's so much to emulate in his generalship. But there was a dark side to Alexander as well. And he was brutal, and he fought for glory. And many of the things that we would consider the worst traits of humanity were manifest in Alexander as well.
Alexander is merciful if his enemies surrender, but cruel if he is opposed. The governor of Gaza, Battus, is defiant to the bitter end. Alexander reveals his cruel side when he punishes Battus. He has him tied with rope, dragged around the city until he dies. It is a familiar scene taken from the pages of Homer's Iliad. Achilles has his arch-rival Hector dragged around the walls of Troy. But in that version, Hector was already dead.
Alexander was brutal. He refined the art of brutality to the highest level. And that is what created his success in many cases. He could not have conquered the way he did had he not resorted to brutal tactics.
With a string of savage victories under his belt, Alexander is ready to take on Egypt, one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. The Egyptian pharaohs were seen as living gods and built massive pyramids, temples, and monuments as testaments to their glory. If the Greeks were dazzled by Egyptian culture, Alexander was even more impressed, and obsessed by the notion that a great ruler could also be a god. After 2 years of warfare, Alexander marches inland to Memphis. The Egyptians are eager to see their Persian rulers defeated. They surrender without a fight and welcome Alexander with open arms.